So I am going to share my screen so you can see my PowerPoint presentation. Okay. Okay, so crafting a college essay by me. So the first thing, I know this is super hokey, and my kids made fun of me for including this slide, but it's really important. The first thing that you really need to know is that you can relax because there's no one way that you should write this essay. There's no magic topic that the people who get into colleges write about. Really, absolutely anything goes as long as you're talking about who you are. So that's really what colleges are interested in. That's what they want to know. So we're going to explore the elements of a successful essay. So essays that really work explore how an event, a person, or thing has influenced the writer. The most successful essays emphasize small moments. So rather than going really big and talking about um, broad topics, you really want to narrow your focus. And a lot of students on the call may remember when they were in the earlier years of elementary school doing something called writer's workshop. And writer's workshop is all about that. That's like when you had the the lined paper that had the picture at the top and then the little dotted lines underneath. And you had to write, like, for example, your teacher might say, write about your summer vacation. Well, you obviously couldn't write about everything that you did during your summer vacation. So you might write about one moment during your summer vacation when you went to visit your grandparents and they took you to get ice cream and it was your favorite flavor and your parents never let you get, a double-decker cone, but your grandparents did, and then you dropped it on the ground. So that one little specific thing, I'm not suggesting that you write about that specifically, but rather than talk about all the things I did, I went to camp, I had a summer job, I went to visit my grandparents, all these cool things that you did, you want to narrow it down and focus on a moment. And a successful essay also really shows change. So it starts at point A and it leads to kind of how you've shifted your thinking or your outlook by point B. So it doesn't need to be this huge dramatic epiphany, but just some sort of insight into how you've gotten to know yourself better, how your behavior has changed, how your attitude has changed to some degree. And that change is really your theme that you want to highlight and emphasize in your essay. Um, so with choosing a topic, the first thing that you want to do, whoops, hold on just a second. Okay, the first thing that you want to do is take out a piece of paper and start free associating, thinking about experiences, people, places, character traits that you want to convey. So often when I work with students, I'll send them home with a questionnaire and tell them to speak to their parents, speak to their best friends. How would people describe you? What are some of these, abiding character traits that if someone has to describe you in, 3 words, what would they say about you? And then you can start sort of musing on that. Thinking of anecdotes, thinking of experiences that illustrate that particular character trait. Or you can think about an experience you had, an outward bound trip. Student I worked with recently wrote about an outward bound trip where because of certain things that the kids did not do as planned, they were not able actually to summit the mountain. That was the whole reason for the trip. And he wrote about dealing with that disappointment. You might write about people who've inspired you. You might write about specific family circumstances. You might write about passions you have. Again, there's really no right topic. There's no wrong topic. It's just the key is really letting the essay readers get to know who you are. So you've probably all by now, or most of you have heard of the common application known as the Common App. And this is very different from, for those parents who are on the line, it's really different from when we were applying to college, where you had to submit a separate application to every university. So instead, the Common App is it brings together about 700 colleges and universities throughout the US. And you only have to write one main essay. And I'm going to elaborate on what I mean in a moment. So you have to write only one you have to write your Common App essay, and then all the schools that subscribe to the Common App accept that essay. Often, though, what will happen is that when you apply to certain schools, they have additional supplemental essays that are typically shorter than the 650 words of the Common App essay. So these are the Common App essay prompts for this year. And I'm just going to go through them really quickly. And then you'll see why I say at the very end that you don't need to worry. You can really write about anything you want. So the first is talking about a background, an identity, interest, or talent that is so defining and so meaningful to you that you feel like you actually can't write anything else because this is so important. This is really who you are. So you can then share your story if that applies to you. The second is, was there some obstacle you encountered that you really learned from, a time where you had a failure or a particular challenge, and how did it affect you? And the most important part of this question is, what did you learn from the experience? The third is, reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted that? What was the outcome? Fourth is, describe a problem you've solved or a problem that you'd like to solve. Any kind of challenge. I have to say that I've never worked with a student who's actually answered that question. I assume that if that applies to you, you know it, but it does not. It's not a super popular prompt. Discussion, accomplishment, or realization, an event that really sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. And this just happened to be the most popular prompt from the 2018-19 college application season. Describe a topic, idea, or concept that you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? Who do you turn to when you want to learn more? I think number one, share some commonalities. And then 7 is that you can write about absolutely anything you want. So that's really why I say at the very beginning, relax. If there's something that you're obsessed with, if there's an experience that you had that doesn't really neatly fit into any of these buckets, that's totally fine. Because again, this isn't like an analytical essay or something you're writing, in a push. This is really intended for the colleges to get to know who you are as a person. Then, this year's Common App contains an optional 250-word prompt about COVID-19. So they just announced this like a week or two ago. And this is an opportunity for students to share what it's been like for them these past few months with the colleges to which they're applying. So one thing that's unclear to me, and I need to get a better answer to this, is does this only apply to like hardships that you faced, whether it's in terms of mental health, whether you've had a family member or yourself been diagnosed with COVID, whether you've experienced deaths in your family? It's not that. That's the way the question is worded. If you read it below, community disruption such as COVID-19 can have deep and long-lasting impacts. If you need it, you can describe those impacts here in 250 words. Colleges care about the effects on your health and well-being, safety, family circumstances, etc., including access to reliable technology and quiet, steady spaces. So what it feels like this is a space where you, what it feels to me, like it feels like this is intended to be a space where you talk about how you were limited by COVID-19 or how you were personally affected by it. If you or someone you know actually caught it, or how your schooling was completely disrupted because you didn't have access to a hotspot or you didn't have access to technology. It doesn't seem to be the place where you would write, let's say you've done something, let's say you've had extra time that maybe, you know, in a normal school year, you would have been at sports practices or doing some kind of after school activity. And let's say you've gotten involved in sewing masks or, you know, helping people who've been affected by COVID, something that you've done that has been directly related to COVID. This doesn't seem to be the place where you would do that, but I'm going to call the college board to call the Common App to see, really to better refine that. And I am aware that some colleges, I just saw an email from Brown University saying that they are actually including a supplemental essay about where you can write about other things that you've done with your time while you've been not in regular school. A lot of students in the area obviously apply to the University of Washington. And so this is their the link to their freshman essay. They have 2 essays and they are not part of the Common App, unfortunately. So you have to write a separate essay for them. Their personal statement is 500 words, which is considerably shorter than the 650 words that the Common App allows. And they also have a short response of 300 words. Now, the personal statement of 500 words is really talks, let me see if I can pull this up here. Here we go. Tell a story from your life describing an experience that either demonstrates your character or helped to shape it. So ideally, what you want to do is pick a Common App prompt that allows you to essentially tell the same story, to recycle the essay, and to just mold it more to fit the answers for UW. You can't always do that, and you may have to write a new essay, but often you can kind of massage it if you are very strategic about how you select your Common App essay. Let me see now how I go back to that. Here we go. Okay, and then the short response, 300 words. Our families and communities often define us and our individual worlds. Describe the world you come from and how you will add to the diversity of the UW. So this is an opportunity, like obviously if you have a particular ethnic or racial background that you want to, religious background that you want to discuss, this is the place to do it. I've had students write about the special character of their neighborhoods. This is often a place to write about the community that students find on sports teams or within clubs. It can be very broadly defined. They're just really looking here to see that you appreciate other people's worldviews and that you're not a jerk. And then they have an additional information an additional essay where you can share any kind of extra info that you feel like you need to about yourself or your circumstances. So I usually say, I have a slide a little bit later on that says if it's optional, you have to do it, but it really does not apply in this case. This is really a prompt where you would use it if, for example, there was an illness in the family, and let's say your grades really fell during a particular semester or year. This is a space where you can talk about that. Or a parent lost a job, and let's say you had to quit some of your extracurriculars and come home immediately after school to take care of younger siblings. So something that you need to explain about your application. If your application in some area doesn't look the way that you want it to, and you feel like there is an explanation, this is the place where you can put that. So in a recent, this is just kind of interesting. It doesn't, you know, it's neither here nor there. It's not like you have to go with, oh, what is the most popular prompt? But about half of people wrote about their background, identity, interest, or talent. About 22% wrote about an accomplishment. 17% wrote about a lesson learned or failure, 10% wrote about a problem solved, and 4% wrote about an idea or belief that was challenged. You may have heard this was college was probably not on your radar because this was 4 years ago, but there was a woman, Brittany, pictured here, who wrote her essay about Costco, and she got accepted into 5 Ivy League schools and Stanford. And I believe she's graduating from Stanford now, so this was 4 years ago. And what was cool about this essay is that she used the experience of going to our hometown big box store to as a vehicle to describe her curiosity. So she would draw parallels between going with her parents to Costco when she was little and exploring all the products on the shelves and how that mirrored her wide-ranging interests. So if you are intrigued by that and interested to see how she did it, you can look it up. But I also include that just as a way to say it was super creative. I doubt any college admissions officer has ever read an essay about Costco before. And it worked because what you took away from reading her essay is, wow, this is a really curious, engaged, interested citizen of the world. So almost anything goes. So, for example, one of the UW prompts asks for an experience that demonstrates your character or helps to shape it. And my suggestion is really define experience very broadly. When you think about experience, it can be like meeting with some interesting person, be it a celebrity, being it, for example, a conversation or a friendship that you've struck up with a homeless person. It could be a news story that spurred you to action. It could be what's going on right now with our country burning down in front of our eyes and how you feel about that, how that may have spurred you to action. Perhaps you were pretty quiet in the past about racism, and now you feel compelled to speak out. Perhaps there's some family event. Perhaps there's a weakness that you have worked really hard to overcome. So something that could be very insignificant to someone else, like going to Costco, might have particular meaning for you. And for those parents listening, one of the best essays that a student I worked with turned out was about Donny Osmond. So you can her obsession with Donny Osmond. So you really can write about anything. Okay, so you have a topic, and now what do you do with it? So once you select a topic, you really want to set about fine-tuning your theme. So, what are you trying to say here? Are you trying to say you're a person who really is super curious and values knowledge? Are you trying to say you really value hard work? Is your theme overcoming adversity, respect for a difference, mistakes made or avoided, always sticking with something, being very persistent? Like, whatever your story is, it needs to say something larger about you and the person you are. And once you've kind of honed that, you create an outline for a way to start it with an anecdote. So an anecdote, most of you probably know, is really a story that has the larger purpose of setting up whatever you're writing and saying, like, it's a story that kind of catapults you into an essay or into an article or into a paper by saying, kind of telegraphing what's going to come ahead, but you're doing it in a storytelling sort of way rather than just in a factual, very straightforward sort of way. And then create a writing schedule to keep yourself on track. So, of course, no one ever would have chosen this online schooling, but the benefit is that that kids are in school. Kids are having to devote far less time to school than they had in the past. Obviously, what is going to happen in the fall is, in terms of how or if we're going to school is completely up in the air. But I really encourage students to get this done, at least to start it, and ideally to finish at least their main essay over the summer. So here's just a little 1 week essay. I mean, you can do it in 1 week. I don't think anyone really does it in a week, but this is kind of just the order of how you would do it. So you brainstorm topics. You identify these themes of your favorite topics, like what we were talking about: curiosity, persistence, hard work, tolerance for others. Choose your top few ideas, map out each idea, which kind of feels the most engaging. Sometimes there's an idea that you really love, but then when you really think about it, you realize you don't actually have that much to say about it. So maybe you could fill up like 2 paragraphs, but then kind of where are you going from there? So in that case, you kind of want to ditch that one. And you want to think, which one are you connecting with the most? Which one really shows your personality, your attributes the most? And then you brainstorm for anecdotal leads, these ways to start your essay by showing and not telling, and write your opening paragraph. Then you write your body paragraphs. It's often, 650 words is not a lot. So often you have an opening paragraph, like ideally an anecdotal lead. And then you have 2, maybe 3 body paragraphs, and then you have a concluding paragraph. And this and the opening paragraph are often the hardest to write, because your opening paragraph, you want to make sure that if you're telling an anecdote or you're just, getting straight into it, whatever you're doing, you want to do it in a way that's really compelling, that is going to cause the person reading your essay to be like, this is interesting, I want to keep reading. Like, they have to keep reading, so they will keep reading, but you want them to be excited and engaged by the topic that you choose. And then in the concluding paragraph, that is really where you want to say, why am I telling you these stories? What am I saying? What does this say about me? This is where you would incorporate any change that has happened. Like, I did feel this, and now I kind of feel this, or now I'm sort of thinking differently, or if anything, this has solidified my belief in who I am, or just kind of whatever. Like, you need to really go into yourself and keep asking yourself the question, why am I sharing this information? What does this say about me? And then you just keep revising. Like I was saying a few slides ago, if they say an essay is optional, do it anyway, with the exception of any essays that are, please tell us about any sorts of extenuating circumstances. But there are often essays that colleges will say, supplemental essays, say 250, 300 words, that colleges will say are optional. And I always suggest that students write these, because everything that you write gives you an opportunity to distinguish yourself and set yourself apart from the other thousands of people who are applying. Because let me just go back to this for a second. You really, when you think about this whole package that you put together when you're applying to college, it's really your grades, which are your grades by the time you're starting your senior year. You've your GPA is kind of what it is. So you really can't adjust that one way or another significantly. Your test scores, if you've taken tests, are what they are. And, so you have teacher recommendations, and you obviously can't control what a teacher writes about you. So they're really the only place where you have control and kind of can set yourself apart is with your college essay. Just one tip here: don't be trite. There are a couple things that you really want to avoid. A lot of students do amazing things, like going to a third world country and volunteering. And I'm in no way saying that is not an incredibly valuable experience. But what I am saying is that unless you have something very unique to write about that experience, don't choose that as your essay, because you don't want to be predictable. And what you would think that a student would write about, a mission trip, or, and a trip to a country that is much poorer than ours, is, I didn't realize how fortunate I was until I saw all these people in need, or all these children at an orphanage in Guatemala. Like, yes, that is true, but It's not surprising. It's not interesting. It's the same exact essay that any other student who had gone to that orphanage would write. So that's how you kind of know that's not a good choice. Another thing that I really advise people to steer clear of is writing about, the soccer championship, or, like a sports tournament, and what it was like to, go so far and then to lose, or what it was like to go so far and then to win. I mean, they've read a million of these, so there's really not, unless you have something, a very unique spin on it, it's not a great idea to write about that. Okay, already said that. Start working on your essay over the summer. This is just a little bit about me. So I'm a mom of 3, including a junior at Garfield, who some of you may know, Aviv Pinker. I have written a book about genetic technologies. I'm also a freelance journalist who's written for a bunch of publications over the years, including Time, the New York Times Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and others. I'm currently a storyteller at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, and those below, that's my email, which you all have, and my Facebook page. Here, my services, I typically offer summer boot camps, but I really can't see where it's like small groups of students together. I can't really figure out how I would do that over Zoom in a way that would be meaningful. So I'm not offering that this summer. So I'm sticking to one-on-one coaching, and these are the prices. So most students typically require 4 hours of support if they come in having absolutely no idea what they're writing about. And the way it works is we would meet over Zoom or FaceTime, Skype, whatever, unless in-person meeting is okayed. But either way, sometimes students find this more convenient. I do a lot of online meetings, have in previous years, even without COVID. And we have a session, we work together, and then the student, goes off and does their thing. So it's not like 4 hours in a row, which would not be a good use of their time. And then they come back and we work further to refine it. And then, so kind of typically that often takes about 4 hours altogether. If there is a problem with finances and someone needs financial assistance, please reach out to me confidentially, of course. I decided to take this slide out, so for the reasons I explained. I think that is it. So I am going to stop sharing and unmute everyone. Okay, so I'm leaving everyone muted. Do I do that? Mm-hmm. Okay, leaving everyone muted, but you can now unmute yourself if you want to. And I'm happy to take any questions, or you can type them in the chat if that's better. Actually, I see there are 3 questions down here. Is there any advice you can give that might be useful or different for those who wish to pursue a STEM career? No, I don't think so. A lot of students I've worked with intend to pursue a STEM career. My son Aviv intends to pursue a STEM career. I think, if there's something that you have to write about, like you had a really cool research experience, or there's something that you want to write about that's STEMmy and valuable and not just braggy, yeah, by all means. But if you haven't yet had that experience, and I know a lot of students are about to enter an unfortunate situation where you may have had really cool internships or summer opportunities lined up, especially STEM related, that can't happen because they're lab-based. So don't feel like like you're hemmed in and you have to just write about a STEM topic. It really can be absolutely anything, because when you think about your whole when you think about your application as a whole, if you're a STEM person, you've probably taken a lot of STEM related courses, perhaps some STEM related AP courses. You'll probably get a letter of recommendation from a STEM teacher, if not two, and that will become clear that that's your interest. You also may have an opportunity in supplemental essays to make that clear. So you don't need to feel like you need to write about a STEM related topic in your Common App. Ooh, lots of questions. Okay. Is there a big difference between Common App, Coalition App? Do they use the same questions? They overlap, but they don't use the same questions. So UW uses the Coalition app, and USI it's actually just one question. You don't have an option to write 7. In most situations, I mean, some colleges will accept either Common App or Coalition. In my experience, Common App seems to be more widespread, more broadly accepted. So most students, unless they're like UW or bust, do need to write a Common App essay, which is why I spent so much time talking about that. How do you balance talking about experiences that have changed your life while not being a cliche? Is it the experience that is the cliche, or its usage in the essay? That's a great question. It's not the experience that is the cliche as much, although an experience definitely can be a cliche, like when I talked about the trip to a third world country and your observations. But what is cliche is the takeaway. I've been talking about, ask yourself why are you saying this? What does this say about yourself? And if what it says about yourself is what, like, if you think about, I think a good way to think about it is, let's say you had a friend who shared this same experience, a friend who went on this mission trip with you, or a friend who went on a mission trip with you. Would your friend write the same essay? Like the same takeaway? Oh, I feel so fortunate. I'm so blessed. I am so lucky, and therefore I'm never going to take things for granted again. So that's where it feels cliche, because anyone who is a person with a shred of empathy or compassion you would hope come away from an experience like that. So that's where I get that's where the peril lies. Are there any topics that are truly overdone that readers are tired of no matter what? Yeah, I mean, again, I know I'm harping on the poor mission trip, but it's like, okay, well-off kid goes to poor country, helps out, comes back, and realizes how blessed and fortunate they are. That's very overdone. The sports essays that I talked about, so you learned the value of teamwork being on the football team. Well, of course you did. Like, what? I mean, in addition to learning the plays, what else would you learn on a sports team other than the value of teamwork? So I think kind of like a good barometer is to think, would someone else who experienced the same thing that I did, would they have the same takeaway that I did? And if so, you probably want to dig a little deeper and find something a bit more unique. Seems like schools might become inundated with coronavirus experience essays. Yes. Should we steer clear unless we have something truly new to say? That is a definite yes. You should absolutely steer clear unless you have something just crazy wild to talk about, because that would sort of be the default for a lot of people. And again, you have to think, how is your experience different than most other students? I mean, learning at home is very boring. It's not at all as good as going to school and being involved face to face with other students, with teachers, attending school clubs. So like, everyone's having the same experience. Everyone's growing crazy. Everyone is sick of their parents. Everyone is having trouble logging onto Zoom. So yeah, there's really not, unless you have something really unique. And that is also exactly why the Common App added that 250 word essay, because they want you, in fact, let me see if I can pull that up just for another second. Okay. So, COVID and the Common App. So I just kind of skipped over, but if you look at the middle paragraph where it says goal, that was written by the Common App. So goal to allow students to address the impact of COVID-19 while using the rest of the application as they would have before to share their interests and perspectives. So that is them saying to you, heads up, people, please do not write about coronavirus. If there's something specific you want to address about your experience or how it impacted you, here is the opportunity to do so. But please don't write just about coronavirus, because like your experience is not that unique, and we'd rather hear about your interests and your unique perspectives. Let's see. How many people would you recommend to revise, edit your essays? That is a that's a subjective question. I mean, definitely at least one. And you want to make sure that that person is a good grammarian, because you definitely do not want to be submitting essays that have, the punctuation is wrong or there's a typo. So run it through, spell check, do run it through all of your digital things, but then get at least one real person. So I think it's a good idea to run it by a parent and to run it by one of your friends as well, someone who you think is a good writer. But if you start asking 5 people, you're going to get 5 opinions, and then you're going to start going crazy. So if you feel it's good, I think getting 2, maybe 3 opinions max is really sufficient. How do I explain bad grades in my freshman and sophomore year that improved significantly after I took time adjusting to high school and had a school change? I think you just do it. You would have a couple of opportunities to do that. For example, if you're applying to University of Washington, that's where you would use the optional essay. Because I feel certain that there got to be things that are more interesting about you than explaining away your bad grades. But if you feel like that is so important, and they are so much lower, that your GPA is so much lower than the average for the schools that you want to apply to, you just straight up talk about, you say here that you took time to adjust to high school and had a school change. I would wonder whether that school change, what was behind that school change, like why did you decide to change schools? And that might be how you address it. Like if the school was, you were getting bullied at that school, or I don't know what your personal situation was, but perhaps the impetus for the school change could be the basis for your essay. But again, I would encourage you to try and find something more interesting about you, because if you write about this, your whole essay is kind of like apologizing for yourself. So there's probably another place on the application that allows you to write about extenuating circumstances. How vulnerable do you recommend being in the personal statement? Well, without knowing specifically what you're talking about, I would say being more vulnerable is preferable to being more guarded. The biggest challenge that students have, that I've seen, is actually being able to dig into their topic and say, like, why are they writing about this essay? What does it say about them? So you want to be able to show vulnerability. You want to be able to show personal insight. So that's always a really good thing. And that's the hardest part of writing this, is like, why am I saying this? What does this say about me? How, being vulnerable is, you don't obviously don't want to come across as a sad sack, but you want to, they definitely want you to be open. They're trying to get to know you. Follow up to the question about being cliche. So how would you go about talking about mental health in a way that isn't overdone or cliche? That's kind of a hard question without me understanding the specific circumstances, but this past year, I worked with a student who wrote about her suicide attempts. and was extremely vulnerable. That was obviously, she was very conflicted about whether she wanted to write about it or not. And actually, in the course of that, that was kind of how she explained why she had she had bad grades in her sophomore year. So as far as how to not be cliche about it, you just, it kind of goes back to the previous question about being vulnerable. You just be really honest. You don't need to sound like you've figured your whole life out and you're like, oh, this particular student was suffering from depression. And she's not like, oh, okay, now I'm taking meds. I'm all better now. Everything's cool. It's a process. And I think that's one thing you have to remember, is that these essays don't have to be like, oh, I was down in the dumps and now I'm 100%. And, there's this complete arc and, book closed, I figured everything out. That's not real life. So you want to just be true to yourself. You want to tell a true story, and you want to be vulnerable while also sounding like you have taken control of the situation. So if you're writing about a mental health crisis, well, how have you dealt with it? It doesn't mean to be like, I'm totally great now, but what are you doing to try and take control of your mental health? So basically showing that you're not passive, that you're someone who tries, that you're a problem solver, and you're trying to figure this out and get yourself to a healthier spot. Someone says school online is awesome. They love it. that is fantastic. Do you specify which prompt you are answering on the Common App? No, you don't. Unless they've changed it for this year. So in previous years, you don't. It's really just designed to sort of give you like a framework. How advisable is writing about family? If you have an interesting family, do readers really care? Is it a good topic? Yeah, it's an awesome topic. Of course, it depends like what you think is interesting. But yeah, I mean, a student I work with wrote about his grandfather. So he has two mothers, and one of his mom's families was very accepting of his parents. And the other grandfather was like a farmer, like growing corn in middle America, and was really not accepting. Did not like the fact that his daughter was gay and was married and had children. And so he wrote about what it's like to have a relationship with a man who doesn't approve of his parents' marriage, and how he was still able to have a relationship with him and kind of appreciate him for what he could provide, while not overlooking his faults, his deficits, but he just wrote about the process of kind of coming to terms with that. Would it be unwise to bring political viewpoints into the essay? Yes. So as I'm sure all of you know, colleges tend to skew liberal. I don't know what your political persuasion is. I just typically discourage that, because it feels like you're writing about something that could bias a reader against you if they disagree with what you're writing about. So is it always off the table? No. I mean, there was one student who was hell-bent on writing about this, and his essay was really interesting. He wrote about, he was a Roosevelt student and wrote about being a conservative in a school where most people are extremely progressive, and what that felt like to speak out in class and to share his viewpoint. So he had some very interesting insights about how he felt shut down, and he felt his high school experience he felt was very lacking, because he often felt pressure to be quiet. So, I mean, I think it worked, but I think you're also taking a chance, because what if someone thinks completely different from you? And, people get very heated about politics. So if you have another idea, I'd suggest going with that other idea. Unless you are this is your idea and you're going to do a great job with it. Let's see. Is it a good idea to write about another person if you focus on what they or their story has taught you about yourself? What is the best way to approach that? That is tricky. You can definitely write about another person, but the bulk of the essay, like for example, your first paragraph, you would want it to be an anecdote about how that person influenced you or what your relationship is with that person. But then you very quickly, because like 650 words is not a ton of words, you very quickly want to get into, why are you sharing this story? Why does this matter? How did this impact you? How has your behavior or attitude or outlook changed as a result of your interactions with this person? So you want to just keep asking yourself, am I writing about me? Am I writing about me? Because that thing needs to be about you. I mean, it's called a personal statement. So you don't want to be writing about your grandma, or I gave that example of the boy who wrote about his grandfather who wasn't happy about the boy's gay parents. So the whole essay was not about his grandfather. The essay was about how this boy learned to kind of, bridge that, basically like how he was able to have a relationship with a man who rejected. I mean, he didn't outright reject his daughter. Like, he still saw her, but he wasn't supportive of their relationship, and how he was able to still have a relationship with his grandfather despite that. So it was still about him. So you just really want to make sure you're still writing about yourself. I don't have any more questions on chat. So I will give everyone another minute or so. If you have any other questions, feel free to post them or to speak them. And thank you so much for joining me. And let me know if I can answer any further questions. You have my email, or if you are interested in working together. And thank you. I hope this was helpful.